Okay.
Got it.
Right. Okay, so let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. As always with these talks, we have new speakers and we see a whole bunch of new faces that we haven't seen in our audience. So it's a real pleasure to have friends old and new with us. And I very much encourage you to follow us if you are new by signing up to our newsletter. I'm just going to start quickly with a program update, because everybody will be interested to know where we are with the Saola Search program. So to do that, I'm going to share my screen for just a moment before I introduce our speaker today. Let's see, share screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen now. I'm actually just going to borrow, I hope you won't mind, a slide from Pete Popolio, who gave one of our presentations previously from Working Dogs for Conservation, one of our wonderful partners. And this pretty much summarizes our goals for 2022. This elite Saola search team that we are striving to form, and actually in the process of forming. So we have Working Dogs for Conservation, who are working with us to form a detection dog team that will be dedicated to searching for Saola. We have a rapid DNA test kit that's developed. Our technical director, Rob Timmins, has just been trained in how to use it. That's going to allow us to process DNA samples within 1 hour to know whether or not it's Saola or not. So completely transform the way that we track and learn about Saola in the forest. And then the third component of our tracking team will be human wildlife trackers. And Rob and our technical team are now well underway for developing and executing a recruitment strategy to find some of the best talent that Lao has to offer in terms of human wildlife trackers. So this really sums up what our goal is for 2022. So everything that we're doing now, myself, Rob, and Bill and Ole, is dedicated to getting this search team out into the forest in the second half of the year. So stay tuned, wish us luck. I'm talking to you from Italy and Tuscany right now. It's dusk. I'm on a bit of a fundraising tour through Europe. I've visited 3 zoos so far in France, and all of them have pledged support to the Saola Search program, and we've got many more meetings ahead. So things are looking good. Momentum is gathering. So I'll just stop sharing now and introduce our speaker today. So our speaker today is Minh Nguyen, who's speaking to us from Fort Collins in Colorado, but Min's actually from Vietnam. So I've worked with Minh in the field. I consider her a very good friend, a very well-respected peer, and she's also now become a research associate for the Saola Foundation. Minh works with the Large-antlered Muntjac. The Large-antlered Muntjac was discovered just shortly after the Saola was discovered in the Annamite Mountains, and is also classified as critically endangered, and has really become some of the research that Min's doing is really paving the way for the types of research and types of knowledge that we're going to need to gain with Saola down the road as we expand our program. So it's been a real asset to have Minh join. Min's currently studying for her PhD with Colorado State University. It's absolutely, I love being able to say that sentence because I've known Minh for many years, since 2018 actually, when I first began working with Saola, and she is one of the strongest, most inspiring women that I know, not just, internationally, right? I mean, she's a leader in the field for inspiring Vietnamese field biologists, but I think she's also a really good example for women all over the world, and how strong and tough you can and should be in order to make it in the field today. So anyway, I'm going to turn over to Minh, and yeah, she's going to give us an amazing talk on her incredible research on Large-antlered Muntjac in Laos, Vietnam. Over to you, Minh.
Thanks, Lauren, for a great introduction. I hope I can be that great.
If you want to share your screen, Minh, go ahead.
Sure, let me share my screen. I will connect with the shelves as well. Yeah, if you can see my screen.
Yep, that's working good.
We need to put on slideshow. Okay. Okay, great. It's really my great pleasure to be able to present on the Large-antlered Muntjac. It is the species of my heart today. And thank you very much for all of your participation today. And I hope my story will be interesting to all of you. So in Southeast Asia, there's an area with mountain range after mountains lying along the border of 3 countries, where people in Vietnam call it Trường Sơn, and people in Laos call it Sai Kulon. And not far to the east of the mountain range is a small province named Quảng Nam. This is the place where I was born. And I'm absolutely one of the most busy child. Since most of my time is like spending from field to field, moving from bushy of trees to another bushy of trees to discover all the wild creatures living around me. And even though I worked so hard, but most of my school teachers were so upset about my study records. And even one time, my teacher was so angry. Minh, you didn't finish your home assignment again. Go, stand outside of the class and think about your mistake. But my nature made me so strong. Instead of working out and standing outside, waiting for my teacher to call me back into the class, I just headed straight to all the fields, trees, bushes, waterways around to continue my discoveries again. So this is the picture of me walking from field to field that you can imagine, and the Annamite mountain just right behind. And since then, people keep calling me a sailor. They kept asking me, who do you want to become in the future? Because they're so anxious and worried for my future. Which I can't really actually tell them my secret. I want to become a female Tarzan, so I can be in the forest, know all the wildlife, understand them, and protect them. And even just talking about me wanting to work with the wildlife, people will tell me like, stop your daydreaming and come back to the reality, please. However, what is not the reality more than the fact that there was a whole amazing wildlife in the Annamite mountain range here, just right next to me, that I didn't recognize. And with time, my young mind also slowly start to believe that working in the forest is not a real job. Until I met Rob Timmins in 2013, the current technical director of the Saola Foundation. His job made me realize that my dream is not daydreaming. I can work in the forest and I can discover all the wildlife the way that Rob has been and was involved in so many discoveries for the Annamites. So as the Annamite stray rabbit, the barefaced bubble, the canoe, and even the species that I'm working on at the moment is the Large-antlered Muntjac. All these species were just described by science nearly 3 decades ago, while I was busy discovering snakes, dragonflies, ladybirds, and fishing. And this, I'm so jealous of what he has been seeing, so I do wish to be able to see more than that. So this is how the forest in the Annamites look like, with it really dense and humid. Are you wondering how did Rob find out about the Large-antlered Muntjac? Suddenly, it was not simple like Jen walking into the forest and see all the wildlife and Tarzan just right there. This is the whole story. So Large-antlered Muntjac came into light in 1993 when Rob was on a survey in Phu protected area. Right at the village just close by, Rob spotted an unusual antler of a muntjac hung in a house. And later, in the same year of 1993, while Rob was on a trekking trip in Nagai Plateaus, he suddenly saw a live female muntjac in the forest. Even though this female sprinted away from him, he got a sufficiently clear look at her rapidly receding tail to be certain that it is a new species of muntjac. And in 1994, Rob and his colleague, Tom Evans, saw more Large-antlered Muntjac trophies displayed in Naga-Plateau villages. And just not long after that, all of observation pieces go together with a live specimen located in not in the wild, but in Lhasa Zoo in Laos. And this is how that Large-antlered Muntjac look like. This is the same zoo where the scientist Biologist spotted Martha, one of a very few Saola ever closely observed. And Robichaud's photos of Large-antlered Muntjac is also the first picture to reach the global audience. And these discoveries, it's just totally my dream, and it's exactly how and who I want to become. A bit about Muntjac. The name Muntjac originates from the Javanese word "muntjac." It means a small deer. But this deer have fangs, as you can see here. The male often have like the big knife for fighting. And the Muntjac also widely known as a barking deer due to their unique cry that sounds like a dog bark. Like I will play this video that you can hear how it bark. I feel like I really love this creature so much. And so in the world, we have like more than 11 species, but like more than 3 species already in the Annamite. So it means the Annamite is really, really unique and distinctive. Oh, I need to move on with this one to make it. Sorry. Okay. So while Large-antlered Muntjac is the species of my hope, I believe we may have heard of many inspiring stories of success, but since I am inspired by the seminar of Dr. Sarah Bombasi from the Colorado State University, Forward from the Failures, and I also heard the talk from Scott Beeler, the psychology of self-motivation. Let's do the opposite today, because I believe all of us do have failures, but we are really, they are really rarely being shared. So let me simply share with you one of the biggest failures in my life, and how you can find a connection with the conservation of the Large-antlered Muntjac, as well as how it connects to all of us. 7 years ago, I started to prepare for pursuing a PhD program at Colorado State University, which can help me initiate a research for Large-antlered Muntjac conservation. Since there is nowhere studying about the Large-antlered Muntjac, and there hasn't been any funding specifically paid for the Large-antlered Muntjac study, I need to gather enough funding for my tuition fees, living expense, and the research. And at that time, I felt very excited with a promising vision in front of my eyes, that soon Large-antlered Muntjac will be abundant again, and that people will easily see them and take a picture of them. And for that big vision, I immediately applied for a funding from the National Geographic, the early career grant, for the research. And I got it. I felt extremely competent. I'm so proud that I wrote the grant for the first time and I got it. Therefore, the next thing to do are applying for scholarships, which is just a piece of cake for me. I really thought like that. In 2018, I applied for the 4th scholarship, which could cover for all my tuition fees and living expenses, but I only got 1. My words was full of disappointment, and I felt a bit lost because 1 will not be enough to cover all my tuition fee and living expenses. However, I'm still feeling fine. I'm still feeling competent, and I gave it another try in 2019. I applied for this 4th scholarship again, and this time I just got only 2 scholarships again, still not enough for my study. At this point, my world was really collapsed. I felt helpless. I didn't dare to appear in front of my parents without any stable job and stable income. I didn't dare to tell my friends about my dream anymore, since they haven't seen my dream come true yet. When they saw me, they actually say, Minh, why don't you think of something easier for your life? Maybe something that can help you earn a lot of money and will not take that long. So I really came to Rob later and said to Rob, Rob, maybe I should give up. I couldn't do it anymore. Maybe I just don't really have any ability. And at that moment, I believe I was driven so much by a negative consequence, an uncertain future for both me and Large-antlered Muntjac, to really make me feel like I can move on. However, Rob told me, you improved so much, and there's so many people out there believing in you, believing in your abilities, like Bill, Lauren, and Joel Berger, who is my advisor. Just calm down and do your best. Think about the positive consequence. The fact that Joel still accepts me as his student and supported me to apply for scholarship again urged me to calm all my frightened consequences down and think about the big vision that I already mentioned to you at the beginning. And from that, I make my choice. I tried again in 2020, and this time I finally got both 2 remand scholarships. If I was so scared of the consequence of uncertain future, I didn't give it a third try. I was already a loser before I even applied for the scholarships. And I didn't do it alone, but with the support of so many people around the world who helped me to come closer to my dream, including many people on the Zoom call today. And I'm really appreciative for all that support. Why I'm that persistent? I'm that persistent because I can't stand by the helplessness. Every time I work into the forest, instead of seeing a live muntjac like Rob used to see, I only can see snares and dead muntjac. Every day working in the forest, I can easily work into hundreds of snares at the area where the hunters are still active. And these rises are extrapolated with limited viable population of Large-antlered Muntjac. And since the Large-antlered Muntjac discoveries, the species has already disappeared throughout most of its home range in the Annamite mountain range here. And only 2 viable populations still remain in Laos, including Konsenama and Nakai Namtan. Why? Because snares are just so cheap. It's so simple and just require little effort to implement. And it can be left for months in the forest, but very efficient and can bring a really high profit to hunters. Nets are also set intensively at industrial scale to maximize the harvest, and particularly effective when combined with simple rib fence made from the forest on the road, like you can see in this net fence. It will take me 20 minutes of working until I will meet the end of the fence. And since snares are really indiscriminate in the animals that we caught, and when the snares are abandoned, the snares are still active and caught many wildlife, it creates a huge waste. And that's the reason why not only Large-antlered Muntjac, but almost all ground-dwelling mammals are dying every day in the forest by the snares. And the snare is turning our lively Annamite into silent forest. And actually, at the moment, many national parks are now realizing that snares are a global issue. And they have been collaborated with many NGOs to do the proper patrol, but we are still failing to save the Large-antlered Muntjac from extinction. However, this is the connection. We are competent, and we should be able to solve this challenge. So in my case, we recently employed an innovative study on how an animal responds and when it encounters a snare. So the way the animal responds to a snare will reflect how likely it is being caught by the snare. Therefore, my team worked with the local hunters to set up a snare fence. Yes, you can see in this picture diagram. But we didn't really set up any real snare at each snare gap here. For each snare gap, we will set up the cameras to record on the animal behavior when it's approaching the snare fence or crossing the snare gap. So this experiment will provide me a knowledge of how many animals are likely to be caught by a snare fence. And this, like you can see here in this picture, in the real reality of our snare setup. So this is a snare fence, and we set up this camera to look at the snare gap to observe any behaviors of the animal when they encounter the snare. And this is me testing the snare gap. This is how the animal will cross the snare gap in the reality. So the input of this study I will use to put forward into a bigger and really interesting study. In this study, I will create a model that simulates the Muntjac movement patterns through the capture and coloring of the Muntjac, and the snare density and pattern through the pattern data that I will ask for the support from the protected areas. The ultimate outcome of these studies is to provide the prediction of how many snares that we need to remove out of the forest, so Large-antlered Muntjac population will have a chance to recover. Now we are really running with time to say the wonderful wildlife of the Annamite. It is so urgent that we need both successful captive breeding program and a safer in forest for them. And with the study that I just described to you all and focus on the Large-antlered Muntjac, I will not be able to save the Large-antlered Muntjac, but also many wonderful wildlife of the Annamite, including the Saola. Therefore, Large-antlered Muntjac now is the species of my hope. And do I believe my hope will come true? I do. Because we all driven by the consequences, but we never stop trying. Just like I was scared of uncertain future if I didn't have the scholarship and failed to achieve my conservation dream. Or it's so uncertain whether these conservation solutions that we all suggested will solve the snaring crisis or not. And it's also connected to our normal life. We are trying to balance between the economy, time, and in our invested effort. But all of that is for the ultimate goal is having a happy life, not only for us, but also for our future children. So how is it possible to have a happy life without clean air to breathe, clean water to drink? Because our ecosystem is dying, and because the disappearance of the Muntjac will stop the seed dispersal process to maintain the forest. So don't let the negative consequences stop you from trying, but let the positive consequences drive you to make a better choice, because we all have our choices. And these choices will create a difference to your life, my life, and to the conservation of the unit Annamite. I have learned to not let the failures to stop me, because failures are steps to the success. And our current conservation strategies and activities are steps to save the Annamite wildlife from disappearing. And your choice will make this world a happy place for many generations. Especially when we make choice, we are not alone. I used to be afraid of reaching out to ask for support, because I used to believe that if people know me, my characters, they will support me. But if I don't even reach out, how people possibly know about me to even support me? Therefore, I'm reaching out today with a story about my fate, about the fate of the Large-antlered Muntjac, the fate of the Annamite wildlife, and about us. We are all strongly bound. And with this, I am seeking for further support to all our efforts at the Annamite. And because we are all a part of the solution to the survival of our unit Annamite. And I actually found quite an interesting quote that I would like to read that to you too. We are far too practical, and in our practicality, we far too often forget that what is practical is far too limited to open the door to the impossible. And with that, I would like to really thanks to all my Lao collaborators like Hamnoi Ole Bontavi, Lin Gelvile, and the authorities of the Conseil Nama. The Vietnam collaborators like Mr. Vũ Thùy, Huy, and the Chiang National Park. And all my inspirations like Bill, Lauren, Rob, Corey, Hannah, Simon, my advisor Joe Berger, Christy Eckler, Hoàng Bích Thị, the WCS director in Vietnam for Vietnam program, and many more that I couldn't list it here. Here's all the organization that I really, really deeply thanks for all of your support for all my journey until now. And of course, many great support around the world that I didn't have the chance, or it's so limited for me to put all of those support here. Thanks for being a part of my story. With that, I really appreciate your talk, and I hope that you enjoyed the talk. And thanks for being also a part of my story today. Thank you.
Thank you, Min. That was absolutely wonderful. If you can stop sharing your screen, please. Yeah. So it's the sun has gone down here in Tuscany.
Nice.
I hadn't planned for that. So anyhow, that was just, thank you. I'm sort of filled with images of you chasing butterflies and fishing as a young girl. And, and one of the things you said, yeah, that picture was wonderful. Failures is a step, are the steps to success. That really resonates with me. A lot recently. I've begun to realize that really you learn so much from failing, and as long as you're open to that, as long as you're open to adapting to those lessons, then success is surely around the corner. And just on that final quote, opening the door to the impossible, I think that is very much in the hearts of everybody at the Saola Foundation, given the challenges that we're facing. So thank you, that was wonderful. Now we're going to do some questions. People have been putting questions in the chat, so I'm gonna read some out to you, and anything that we don't get to, we can respond to by email later. So the first question, from Kristen Steinmetz, we have, thank you, Min. Are there any results yet to your snare fence research, or is it still in this planning stages?
Yes, that's an interesting question. We already have two implementation, two experiments with snare fence like that in one site in Vietnam and one site in Laos. And I'm still analyzing the data at the moment, so we don't have very absolute result at the moment. But one thing that I can tell you that's very interesting about the behavior of the animals is, for example, with the snare fan, where the Large-antlered Muntjac roasting, the Large-antlered Muntjac is less likely to really hesitate to roast the snare. It just roasts straight the snare gap, go through the snare gap straight. But another species that we observe is the Saola. The Saola is really, really aware, wary animals that is just like when it encounters the snare fence, instead of roasting the snare gap, it's just working along the snare fence and even try to go through the fence. And it didn't try to get through the snare gap at all. It's mean, you can see that their behaviors will reflect so much of how vulnerable they are to the snare. And I am going to also to have another experiment later in Nagai Nam Thanh, and I hope that all the results that I can publish very soon to let you all know how animals will be likely to be caught in the snare.
Thank you, and I look forward to that. Next question from Bill Allen. One of the photos showed a muntjac that looked with what looked like velvet antlers. Are muntjacs unlike Saola in that they have antlers and not horns?
Yes, they are really different. Because the Muntjac antler, you can imagine it's just the same like the antler of the many deer species in Europe and in America here. They also shed their antler, and anytime that they shed their antler, it will be once a year or twice a year. But I will need to with my data, I will be able to present that very soon too. But anytime that they shake their antler, the new velvet antler will be developed. So that reason why you can see the velvet one. It's very different from Saola. It's a horn that will not shed.
Great, thank you, Min. Right, the next question is from Tony Stones. Do we have a population estimate for the number of large-antlered muntjacs that are still left in total? How many might there be left in the Nam?
This is a very interesting question, and the interesting question for all of us, you know, and working in the field as well. So you can see that it's really hard to be able to, you know, have the right method to estimate a very robust population density of the Large-antlered Muntjac. All the methods at the moment we have, like mainly with like camera traps, we really don't have a good resource to really can provide a good number of individual muntjacs still available, for example, in Nam. We at the moment have the records of presence and absence of the muntjac in different regions in Vietnam and Laos, and recently we have the record, you know, we have a new record of Large-antlered Muntjac in Vietnam, a small part of the Annamite mountain as well in Cambodia. So maybe like the person who maybe like can work in the forest a lot, he may can provide the better answer, you know, with his estimation. Maybe Rob can help me answer that as well. And yeah,
Rob,
Yep. Hello, everybody. Yeah, to just give a quick summary. So, you know, piecing together kind of all the information, a lot of it based on, as Min said, camera trapping. It essentially looks like, you know, over most of Large-antlered Muntjac range, you know, they've either been extirpated, which seems to be the case based on a lot of the results, or in, you know, in a scattering of sites, we're talking really about just really small numbers, you know, of scattered remnant muntjacs, so no longer really functional populations. In the two sites that Min mentioned, in Nakai and Khonsay Namar, there, you know, particularly again based on the camera trapping results, it really does look like we have, you know, functionally intact populations, and so in those places we're probably talking, but obviously quite, you know, these are localized populations, but within them, you know, potentially still hundreds, you know, maybe low thousands of animals. But those are the exception rather than the rule. So hopefully that gives everybody a bit better idea.
Thanks, and yeah, it's also a very stark contrast to what we believe to be true for Saola. So yeah, okay. Next question is from William Leacock, so Bill Leacock. How many different species have you observed in the camera traps along the snare lines? And what would be the most common animal seen in your photo traps?
Yeah, this is a quite hard question for me. I mean, it's not hard, but it's hard at the same time because so we have like the camera traps like that in Vietnam and in Laos. The most common species in Vietnam that we see now is like the fiery badger, and actually there's so many species have been recorded on our camera traps, both in Vietnam and in Laos. If like you know, all the route dwelling mammal that living around the area of that snare fence where we set up, we will be able to record them. So depends on like what species that you want to know, then I can let you know, because like it will be a list of data that I will need to look through that to be able to tell you all the species. But one thing that interesting here is that like in Vietnam, where we set up the cameras with like in the area with really intensive hunting, we just got only 2 individuals of Large-antlered Muntjac in that fence, around that fence. But in Khonsay Namar, we got much more. Khonsay Namar maybe around 5 to 10 animals. But like we got much more records of Large-antlered Muntjac in Khonsay Namar, where it's with less intensive hunting.
Great, thank you. So the next question from, apologies if I'm saying this wrong, Michael Hui. When looking at the camera trap photo, how can you differentiate a female large-antlered muntjac from other species of muntjacs living in the Annamites?
Yeah, so with this question, I hope everyone will become experts after this. And you can tell me on the picture of large-antlered muntjac in the future as well. So the female muntjac often you can distinguish with the patterns on the head and also by its tail. So the head of the muntjac, it will have a dark patch that running between the two glands that have located on the nostril side on that muntjac, that it will run the whole way, cover the forehead of the muntjac and to the back. So that's only large muntjac we have that character. Other muntjac will not have that. And the large muntjac female also will have a broader and shorter tail. You can see on the mice ring as well, two tails, broader and shorter. But the other muntjac quite long and thin. So these are two key characteristics that we use to distinguish between the large-antlered muntjac female with other muntjac females.
Great, thanks, Min. So we're just going to do a few more questions before we wrap up. Doing this next one's are Matthew Ardiolo. In the two areas where there are significant large-antlered muntjac still present, do you have an understanding as to why they're doing better in those areas than others? Is the snare pressure not as high potentially?
Yes, and actually that's our predictions and from the observation in the field. So in the area in Vietnam that we're doing, most of the area in Vietnam at the moment, they have quite intensive hunting with the snaring. So maybe that's the reason why the large muntjac didn't present and present that many in Vietnam. But in Laos, in these two sides, we didn't see a lot of many sites of intensive hunting, especially snare in these two areas. So maybe that's the reason why that the large muntjac still abundant in these two regions, two areas. And especially also in Nai Gai Nam Thanh and Con Sen Nam Mai at the moment, people are employ a very intensive patrol effort that may also help, reduce the snaring hunting in the forest.
Okay, thanks. And the next two questions are in a similar vein, so I'll read them both at once. So we've got Bill Allen. What's driving the snaring? Is it for local consumption, or are snared animals being exported as part of trade? And then Karen Eichel asks, you mentioned that the areas are heavily hunted. Are there any regulations on hunting the large-antlered muntjac and other animals? So yeah, just two interrelated questions there to finish up.
Okay, so yes, there's so many reasons in here. What is the main mechanism really trigger the snare hunting? We have really, if you can see in my map before, we have Vietnam and Laos border with China, and Vietnam and Laos is really the place where we have a huge consumption of the wildlife products. We also have really big population in Vietnam and China, and this plumbing population also cause the plumbing demands in the wildlife products, and that also the reason why it triggered the intensive hunting from Vietnam and cover to Laos side as well. At the same time, we also have many infrastructure construction that is fragmenting and isolating the forest. That also create the access to the forest much easier. Therefore, the wildlife is much more vulnerable to hunting. So that is really the main reason why that the snare hunting is really intensive. I don't see much people consuming many research, they said that it's not people consuming a lot of wildlife for their own local consumption. With the legal, we do have a lot of laws to try to protect the wildlife in the forest, and it actually it's forbidden to harvest any large-antlered muntjac in the protected areas. However, you can imagine it's even harder for us researchers to get into forest because we all need the permission, but the hunter didn't ask for any permission. They just can go from anywhere to the forest illegally, and it's really hard to control. It's really hard to fight them. So that's the reason why I have that, have my current research at the moment, and we try to fight and try to figure out how to solve this problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Min. It really is groundbreaking research that you are conducting. I can't wait to hear your talk in the next year or 2 years' time once you've gathered and analyzed your data and have some answers to these questions. So thank you so much. So before, I think the sun is well and truly down in Italy. I'm at risk of being hunted by some Italian wolves. So it's like we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for all the time and thought that you've put into this. Thank you everybody who's joined us today. As I said at the start, you can follow us at the Saola Foundation by signing up to our newsletter. So that's the www.saolafoundation.org. We would love to have you join in the adventure that we're embarking on. And we hope to see you for the next seminar, which will be in the oh goodness, in the autumn. We're going to have a break over summer, so everybody get outdoors and enjoy yourselves. Okay, thank you, Min, and goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.